NASA says climate science will move aside. Satellite images will soon be fried. Agency says exploration is the only goal. There are other planets yet to troll.
Hey everyone, I'm Jade Begay on Indigenous House, and today I'm sitting with Mark Trahant, who is a total legend. He is of the Shoshone-Bannock tribe, and over the course of his 50 years in journalism, he has led newsrooms, including Indian Country Today, which he famously led to new heights. Mark has also been a Pulitzer Prize finalist, and just this year, Mark won the 2025 IF Stone Medal for Journalistic Independence, which is a big frickin' deal.
Thanks, Jade. This is going to be fun.
How did you become so passionate about storytelling and reporting?
My first newspaper, back when newspapers were around, was a crayon newspaper called The Sun, and I was about 10, and it was all crayon. I loved, my grandfather would always read newspapers, and I loved the idea of getting different versions of the same story, and that always intrigued me, that different people had different conclusions. And so I'd pick up for back then a quarter to read different accounts. Really got into it professionally with radio. Used to do a little radio show called the Showband Radio Hour, and then got lucky and started doing play-by-play for basketball tournaments. Fort Hall, that's a huge thing. I mean, basically the month of March is basketball tournaments, and a local radio station let me do the play-by-play.
Well, as I mentioned, much of your life's work has been at Indian Country Today. Can you just tell us what it's like running a native news outlet?
Well, the main thing is that it had gone out of business, and there are many of us that just knew that could not be. There was no national voice, and one of the things that really Tim Geigo started was this idea of one place, particularly in a crisis, that everybody could look at and know there was news coming out of it. And so we knew we had to get something going again. I brought together a bunch of journalists, and of course we wanted to do it ourselves, but by that time the Oneida Indian Nation had donated the assets to the National Congress of American Indians, and they called me and said, do you want to try to bring it back to life? One of the most amazing stories, and so much of it, you look back, you think just how lucky you were to be at the right place at the right time.
Oh, yeah.
But I was speaking in a little town in a reserve actually in Canada, about an hour north of Detroit. And that night, that very night, the same agenda had Elijah Harper, who had just voted against Canada having its constitution returned. And it was like this conquering hero. And I just happened to be there. Next day, it was on the front page of the Arizona Republic. And I was thinking how, so much of it is just fortune.
What was it like going from a non-native news outlet to a native news outlet? What are some of the biggest differences you saw?
Well, as a reporter, I tried to make sure that lots of people thought about Indigenous issues as part of the fabric. And so they would be covered on their own. And so when there was a good story, I'd give folks like 3 days. And if they didn't do it, I'd just go do it. But I tried to get other people doing things. And I think that's really important because you can't be alone. And one of the mistakes of the news media is to have one reporter and think they've done their job from Indian Country. It needs to be people who can talk to each other, bounce ideas off each other, get excited by things, and it's a process. It's not just one person.
Yeah. It's 2025, and I think there's probably like a handful of news outlets that have a native reporter or a native desk.
There are a few.
Okay.
The Washington Post, New York Times, Seattle Times, Arizona Republic. That said, there's more independent voices than ever before. And folks are finding new ways, whether it be on TikTok or just writing on Substack, to audiences that are still deeply interested in this information. So in that sense, I'm optimistic about the ability of individual journalism. It's just not going to be corporate journalism like it used to be.
Well, that's a really good segue into what you're up to now. Tell me a bit about your project and collaboration with Indigenous House.
The main thing is there's so many stories that we think of as news that have context, that something happened 50 years ago, 75 years ago, that put it in perspective. And I want to find a way to bring that in. You write a lot about climate change. There's a 10,000-year history with climate change. This is not the first time. And to have that context should be in every, if not written in the story, at least in the thinking of the story and how you frame it.
What do you hope to do with breaking history?
Well, two. One, to add context to stories that are in the news now. But the other is I've long thought that there ought to be canon stories. And those are the stories that everybody should know. Whether you're from Indian country or just a citizen, if you know these canon stories, they help you understand everything. For example, The Return of Blue Lake is a canon story. Everybody should know that because it's so important.
One of the first land back moments just up here in Taos, New Mexico.
Right. In 1906, the Secretary of Agriculture just took it, and leaders of the Taos Pueblo were insistent that it would come back to them. And I'm lucky. I was actually able to interview a lot of the folks firsthand. John Ehrlichman was a big player in that. When he looked at the documents, he said, there's no way this shouldn't be part of the Pueblo. And the Nixon administration moved to return Blue Lake.
Wow. To see all of that happen and then to see the progression or evolution of land back into, it's really become like pop culture in Indian country, I feel like.
And it's just beginning. I think we don't really see the significance yet. And of all the screwy things going on with this administration, land back may be the loudest argument. And it's partly for economic reasons. They don't want to have to deal with it. But partly because it's so easy to do. And whether it's actual management or ownership, there's just so much that can be done with this.
Say more about that.
In the first administration of Trump, there was some land back areas. And really what it came down to is not wanting to go through the process of government. This is an administration that really doesn't like government. And that changes everything. And they're also transactional. And so that allows you to go to them with a plan saying, look, and I'll use a big one that's really preposterous. We can manage Yellowstone cheaper than you can. And here's how we could make it work. Maybe it's a coalition of Shoshone-Bannock and Crow, which history would love. Maybe it's another group of folks, but there are ways to make it work extraordinarily. One of the things that has been my passion as a writer is salmon. And I started, Shoshone-Bannock have the most inland salmon fishery. And you've seen that, and it's not land back per se, but after Boldt Decision, which gave the tribes the right up to 50% of the harvest, after that decision in the Supreme Court, tribes started investing in natural resource management in ways that states never did.
Right.
And that same promise can work across the federal government too, where tribes are willing to say, our budget may be only $10 million, but we're going to spend $6 million on natural resource rehabilitation and get something out of it.
Yeah, I have to just indulge in the climate conversation for a minute. We're seeing a lot of climate funding being taken away, but one of the things that is giving me hope, at least in this moment, are Indigenous solutions, which are so resilient. Are you seeing any exciting projects emerge around climate adaptation?
I think folks are starting to try to figure it out and look for ways that are innovative. To me, what's missing from the discourse about climate is that when it comes to the cost of climate, whether it's mitigation or adaptation, they're inevitable. And so you can put it off, but you can't stop it.
Right.
And the more you put off mitigation, the more you're going to spend on adaptation. And we're starting to see that already just this year with flooding and other things. And if you look forward, and this is where you're seeing innovation from tribes. I was in Quinault last year, and the thoughtfulness that they're doing to relocate Tahola is really remarkable. And if you drive from Seattle to Tahola, you go through maybe 35 lowland communities that are not doing this. And they're going to have to learn from Quinault pretty quick because whether it's a storm surge or a sea level rise, floods are coming. And then you've got a question of, do you want to rebuild something that's not going to survive the next one, or do you want to do something different?
Right, yeah.
And I did see some of this in Dominica after the last hurricane, where folks are saying, we don't want a power grid. We want to have very small electric sources near our houses so that if there is another storm, we can adapt that neighborhood rather than the whole island.
Right. Well, taking kind of a shift of gears here, I hear you're a bit of a poet. I follow you on social media. Can you share
I have to look them up.
one of your poems with us?
So it's funny. I started that when I was at the Seattle Post-Intelligencer, and there was this new thing called Twitter, and I didn't know what to do with it. And I thought, I'm just going to try a 4-line rhyme because that'll fit within the 160 characters. And when I was editing ICT, I didn't have time for any of that, so I stopped. But last year, someone called up who's writing a book on journalism and poetry, and they wanted to include a lot of my work from Twitter. And so I thought, you know what? I'm not a daily editor anymore. I should start again. And so I started again. Let me see. Today's, I think, is kind of fun. It's called The News Rhymes, and it's on Instagram now instead of Twitter. And today's is NASA says climate science will move aside. Satellite images will soon be fried. Agency says exploration is the only goal. There are other planets yet to troll.
Wow. I love them. Yeah, it's definitely a nice way to break up the very daunting onslaught of headlines. Well, thank you so much, Mark, and I can't wait to hear all these untold stories that are just essential to us understanding the larger context of Native history. I'm going to be following along your channel.
Thank you.